single night.
Well, it's good to know, but no surprise, that the Prime Minister thinks that $54 million is just a petty matter. According to one programmer, demonstrated that the ArriveCan app could have been designed in a single weekend for less than $250,000. Instead, this Prime Minister paid $54 million. 10,000 people were sent by that app wrongly into quarantine when they shouldn't have been. And many of the contracts went to companies that have home addresses as their headquarters. Will the Prime Minister supply Canadians with the full list of all of the contractors who got the money?
You're right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Well know, since day one of the pandemic, we were focused on providing them the support and the safety necessary in this unprecedented time, despite the political games the Conservatives chose to play throughout the pandemic. Obviously, the amount cited includes far more than just the initial development of the app. It includes services like cloud storage, IT call center services, upgrades, and future costs. On this side of the aisle, we will continue to put the safety and security of Canadians at the center of everything we do in unprecedented pandemics or in regular times, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, creating a $54 million app well over budget that could have been created in a weekend for under $250,000 does not protect anybody's safety, nor does an app that sends 10,000 people wrongly into quarantine. But the strangest thing is that there are these roughly dozen companies that got the contracts to supply this app. The Prime Minister does not want to give all of the names of the subcontractors that got that money. I challenge him now. Will he commit to supply this House with the list of all the subcontractors who got the money, who got rich?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians well remember that during this unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic, we had a government that was stepping up to do everything we could to keep them safe, to keep them protected. That's exactly what we stayed.
I'm just going to interrupt for a moment. If I can have your attention. Order. I just want to remind the honourable members the role of the whip, and sometimes if you look to them, they'll be giving you instructions. And I believe some of the whips are kind of going like this. That means calm down. You're welcome, Madam Whip. The Right Honourable Prime Minister, from the top, please.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians well remembered that when this unprecedented pandemic hit us as a country, we pulled together. We had a government that stepped up to work with other orders of government to deliver all the protections we possibly could for Canadians in an unprecedented time. We were there to have Canadians' backs. While Conservatives were peddling vaccine misinformation and refusing to follow public health directives, we stepped up and made sure that Canadians had all the tools to deliver safety for them. That's what we will continue to do, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
They stepped up to put money in the pockets of their friends. We don't forget the We Charity, Mr. Speaker. But now someone got rich here. Someone designed an app that didn't work, that sent 10,000 people wrongly into quarantine, that had addresses, home addresses, as the headquarters of the companies that received the money. Many of the subcontractors are still secret, and if the Prime Minister will not tell us the identity of those companies, then maybe he can tell us who was the genius. Would the genius who spent that $54 million on an app that could be designed in a weekend please stand up now?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our focus throughout this pandemic was being there to support Canadians. And before the member of the opposition criticizes me again for that, we spent billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars to support Canadians through this pandemic with direct income supports, with supports for small businesses. And we did that because we knew that being there for Canadians through an unprecedented, difficult time would ensure that our economy would come back faster after it. That's exactly what happened, Mr. Speaker. We were there for Canadians while Conservatives can criticize us every step of the way.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The CLC put out a report by Jim Stanford which highlights some serious concerns
with the Bank of Canada's approach to inflation. They lay out two mandates the Bank of Canada must follow. One, to keep inflation in check, and two, to encourage maximum employment, sustainable employment. Well, given the fact that the increased interest rates of the Bank of Canada will not address the root causes of inflation, they're going to certainly create a self-induced recession, which will result in massive job losses. Does the Prime Minister agree with the Bank of Canada's approach?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we support the integrity and independence of our institutions. Canada has a long and storied history of strong institutions, from the Supreme Court to the Bank of Canada, that manage, in counterpart with the work that is done in this House, to serve Canadians, and we will continue to defend the integrity and the independence of those institutions, unlike, apparently, multiple parties on the other side of the aisle.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
New Democrats have a rich tradition of calling out institutions which end up exploiting people or hurting people. And it's clear that the government of Canada sets the mandate. Now, this very same Bank of Canada, the governor has stated to employers, discouraging them to increase wages to keep up with inflation, which is ludicrous because there's absolutely no evidence that high wages have in any way contributed to inflation. In fact, wages have not kept up with inflation historically. So does the Prime Minister agree with the Bank of Canada discouraging employers to increase wages to keep up with inflation?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, allow me to pause right now and salute and thank all the union leaders across the country who've been strong in fighting for better wages for their workers, working in partnership with this government in an unprecedented way to ensure that we're growing the middle class and helping people working hard to join it. We will continue to make sure that we're working with labor, we're working with bargaining agents, we're working with workers to ensure that they're getting paid well for the work they're doing, that they can support their families and their communities. We will do so in a way that Canadians expect us to.
The Honourable Member